Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet NRL Round 5 betting trends preview. In this video, I'm going to go through all the 8 games coming up this weekend. I'm going to look at the betting trend history between these two sides. Have their matchups been going over under the total? Who's been winning? Who's been covering? What were the odds in their previous meetings? So you can make informed betting decisions this weekend and profit on the NRL. Also touch on some other just general trends. We're going to go through some of the team lineups and also statistics from an attacking and defensive perspective for this matchup. This is all information that's included in the NRL Best membership, which is where you also see everything I'm personally betting as well. The first game on Thursday night, you have the Canberra Raiders back at home against the Sharks. Both these sides are on a 5-day turnaround after playing on Saturday. Sharks played in Sydney where they lost to the Bulldogs. Canberra returning from their loss against North Queensland up in Townsville. So both sides coming off losses. Both will be keen to win this game. Sharks are currently favourites, -5.5 with a handicap at 47.5 points. Early on in the week, the Sharks were put up -5.5 point favourites. That's come down to -3.5 now, and the total hasn't moved from the 47.5 points. 9 of the past 13 between these two sides have gone over, so we do have a strong history of high-scoring matchups between these two sides, and I think the Sharks will be definitely keen to bounce back from an attacking perspective. They just really struggled last week against the Bulldogs, who are still undefeated and a very good defensive side. That was their lowest score of the season, only the 6 points. Prior to that, they'd scored 22 plus in the other 3 games. And the Raiders so far this season are conceding 25 points on average. They conceded 30 last week against the Cowboys, who haven't been that great in attack, 40 against the Eels and 22 against the Broncos across their past 3 games. So Sharks should get the opportunity to get their attack rolling in this matchup. They do lose Kyle Iro out on that left edge, and also Talakai is out for them. Probably the biggest in is Tom Hazelton coming in on the bench for the Sharks to strengthen their forward pack. From a middle of the field perspective, I think the Sharks can control field position and get their attacking chances in this game. They have won and covered the past 3 versus Canberra, but the Raiders have won 4 of the past 5 when they've been at home versus the Sharks. This game really does hinge on if the Sharks can get their attack going like it was in previous weeks, which I think they're going to be able to. Canberra are a little bit vulnerable here. Short turnaround off back-to-back road weeks. Sharks have to be motivated to win this game. They need to go 3-2 on the season. Can't afford to go 2-3 with their schedule coming up following this. They'll travel to Perth to play the Seagulls, then up to Newcastle to play the Knights, play the Tigers, then up to Brisbane to play Parramatta, and then an away game against the Seagulls. That's what the following 5 weeks for them looks like. And this is a very important game for them to get over the line. So I like the Sharks to win. Last time they traveled to GIO, even though they've lost 4 of the past 5 there, they did win last season in round 8, 40 points to 0. Sharks won 36-22. Also think like this matchup, there wasn't great expectations on Canberra early on in the season, and they proved there's life in the team with their early couple of games, but since then they haven't been great at all. They lost to the Seagulls by 28, lost to the Cowboys last week by 10, and just with those back-to-back road games, traveling back might be a touch vulnerable. They also have Parramatta next week and could have one eye looking ahead to that game as a potential easy win based on how Parramatta's been going so far this season. So like the Sharks to get over the line in the opening game as the better overall squad. Panthers versus Cowboys. The Panthers opened 11.5 point favourites, but do get Nathan Cleary back into the team. With the news that he was announced, this line went up to -13.5. We see him listed in the halves right there. Casey McLean comes into the win. Still no Dylan Edwards at fullback. Obviously not the strongest Panther side, but at home, deserving to be favourites for this game. But I do think at -13.5, that's really starting to push it. Cowboys have been under the pump a bit to start the season. The win last week against Canberra would have got their confidence up a little bit. Tricky situation for them on the road here. However, one thing to keep in mind is they have won 3 of the past 4 versus Penrith, covered 4 of the past 5, and did go down to Bluebet Stadium last season in round 17 and beat the Panthers 16 points to 6. So with a big handicap, I think Cowboys can keep it somewhat close. I'm not sure if I want to take plus 13.5. I'll decide that closer to game time. And with the total, it's open 49.5. It's moved up to 50.5. 3 of the past 4 between these two sides have gone over. We know Penrith are capable of scoring points. Defensively, they haven't been great this season compared to especially what they've been in previous years. So far, they've conceded 28 plus points in their last 3 games, and overall in the season are conceding 29.5 points on average. Both these sides ranked in the bottom 4 defensively, and I think that's why we're seeing like a fairly high total for this game. The other thing when looking at the stats here, the Cowboys concede the most line breaks per game in the competition and also make the second most missed tackles. There's a chance Penrith get to the 30 points in this game. Cowboys showed better form in attack last week than they had been prior, and they might be able to find enough points to push this over against the Panther side that hasn't been great defensively, and it's hard to see that turning around anytime in the next couple of weeks. Home team has covered 6 of the past 7, so that leans you towards Panthers winning. And Cowboys are 0-3 at CommBank Stadium, and all 3 games they've played here have been against Parramatta, which now facing Penrith is much tougher opposition for them. The later game on Friday, the Rabbitohs versus the Roosters. Rabbitohs for this game are favourites. They were -1.5, they're now -2.5, and the totals moved up from 47.5 to 49.5, even though 4 of the past 6 between these two sides have gone under the total points line. The past 2, though, have gone over. Last time they met, it was a 52.5 point line at this venue in round 27, and there was a total of 64 points scored in that game. Bit of a shootout last time they met. In the game prior, the Roosters put up 48 points back in round 3 last season. So far this season, there's big question marks on the Roosters' attack. Aside from the game against Penrith, where they scored 38 points, their attack's been pretty much non-existent in every other game. And Rabbitohs defensively have been pretty good. They rank 11th in points conceded, but when we look through their overall games, most of those points came against the Dragons and Sharks. They kept the Panthers to 18 points last week and scoreless in the first half. And back in round 1, the Dolphins to 14 points. Do think both sides will get around the 20 to 26 point mark in this game. It's not going to be a super low grinding game. Rabbitohs attack has definitely shown glimpses that they can put it together, and the Roosters defense currently ranks 16th in the league, concedes 31.5 points on average, and have conceded 30 plus in 3 of their 4 games. The only game they didn't was against the Warriors over in New Zealand a couple of weeks ago. So I think we're going to see a fairly high scoring game, slight lean towards the over. From a head-to-head perspective, the way the Rabbitohs are playing, I have more confidence in them winning this game. I don't want to put too much weight behind them because definitely these odds are being influenced by their win against Penrith last week. So the betting companies know that people will see the Rabbitohs beat Penrith, they should beat the Roosters. So I'm definitely slightly wary of taking a side. Purely based off that perspective, the value would slightly lie with the Roosters, but at this stage I don't want to get involved, but prefer the total and lean towards the over in this matchup based on how these sides have defended so far this season. Also in this Rabbitohs-Roosters game, you've got the return of Latrell Mitchell for the Rabbitohs, which that definitely makes an impact on the odds. If you take out those 2 factors, so their game last week and Latrell Mitchell playing, I think Roosters will go into favour. So just be slightly cautious taking the Rabbitohs. If I had to tip a side, I'd probably tip them. But from a betting perspective, I'm happy to sit out at this stage. First game on Saturday, the Eels versus Dragons. There's been no odds movement in this game. Dragons opened a 4.5 point favourite. It stayed there, and the total stayed at 49.5 points. 4 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone under, but 2 of the past 3 have gone over. Eels have won the past 3 versus St. George. You can see last time they met, they won by 4 points, 44 points to 40, 26 to 20 the game prior in 2023, and then back to 2022, they won 48 to 14. Only a 4.5 point line. It's definitely very low. The Dragons coming off beating the Melbourne Storm. 2 players who switched sides last season, Zach Lomax, who played for the Dragons, now playing with the Eels. Clint Gutherson, who played for the Eels, now playing over at the Dragons. Those players will definitely be keen to make a statement against their old sides. But Dragons coming off the win last week against the Melbourne Storm, get another prime opposition to put another win on the board and get their 2nd win of the season. Keep in mind they were winless going into that game against the Storm off their bye last week, and Parramatta still chasing their first win overall in the season. Parramatta right now, the worst attacking side and worst defensive side. So you'd expect the Dragons to be winning this game. However, it's just the record of Parramatta against them scares me a little bit. We've seen so far this season, like teams with bogey matchups, that trend has continued. So this game is a good test of that, whether the Eels can actually continue that trend against the side they have a good record against previously. Overall, though, I would lean towards the Dragons winning. I am expecting points in this game. Their matches over recent years have all been high scoring, but then also with the Eels' defense, they just always concede points. If we go back through their matches so far this season, they've conceded 56, 32, 14 against the Bulldogs, and then 26 last week against Manly. Dragons will get 24 to 30 points in this game. And then for Parramatta, I think they'll find points, but it won't be a huge amount. So I like the Dragons to get over the line and lean towards this game going over. At 49.5, I don't think there's much value, though, in the total, so we're looking at other ways to play it. But overall, this is probably one of the ugliest games off the round with those two sides going up against each other. Titans versus Dolphins. For this matchup, Gold Coast 5.5 point favourites back at home after beating the Roosters last week, but the line has moved down to -4.5. Totals moved up a point from 52.5 to 53.5. For this matchup, lineup-wise, there's no major changes for either side. It's really hard to see much improvement coming from the Dolphins. They're a side just really on the back foot to start the season. 4 straight losses, and after this game they play the Panthers and Storm. So I'm expecting Gold Coast to winning this game of what they've shown us so far this season. They have many more points in them than the Dolphins, and defensively are the better side. And Dolphins are hugely at risk of going 0-7, 0-8, maybe even 0-9 to start the season. For Gold Coast, they don't have a great record against Redcliffe, which is a concern. Even though they won the game last season, they did lose the 3 original games against Redcliffe, and Redcliffe have gone into Seabus Stadium and won both meetings. But I like the Titans to get the win. They're playing a lot better football so far this season. They're playing well in attack and also in defense. 30 points last week against the Roosters, 26 the week prior against Newcastle, and 24 against the Bulldogs. The thing to keep in mind here, the Bulldogs and Knights are both top defensive sides, and Gold Coast found 24 plus points against both of those sides. They should have no issue doing that against the Dolphin side that has a lot of issues defensively. They're giving up the 12th most points in the league per game, 15 points in the first half, a lot of meters post-contact, so Gold Coast should have plenty of good field position. They're the number 3 side in generating post-contact meters. That tells us they'll win the battle in the middle. The game will be played down there into the field, and if they can convert their opportunities inside that 20 to 30 meters, they'll run up a score here. So I like the Titans to get over the line and win this game fairly comfortably and put together 3 wins in a row. From a total perspective, at 53.5, the past 3 going under. Find it hard to see this match going over unless the Titans score 40 plus points. So instead of taking a full game over, the preferred option would be looking at the Titans team total to go over, as there's just question marks on this Dolphins attacking side at the minute. Broncos versus West Tigers. Broncos at home again this week. 3rd straight game at home. -17.5 point favorites. That line has stayed the same. Totals up from 51.5 up to 52.5. 4 of the past 5 between these sides have gone over. These and both sides defending really well. Tigers, number 2 defensive side. Last week against the Warriors was their first kind of slip up, where prior to that they hadn't conceded over 18 points but gave up 26 last week. Keep in mind, Warriors were at 18 points with about 10 minutes to go though. And in attack, they have scored 24 plus in each of the past 3 games. No Jerome Luai for the Tigers this weekend is a big out for them. Jordan Ricky is out for the Broncos. But Broncos at home should be winning this game. 17.5 points is a huge line to cover. Tigers defensively playing a lot better. I think I'll be leaning towards the over in this game between these two sides. Like, Tigers defensively weren't great last week. Broncos have points in them when they put it all together, which can sometimes be a bit of an if, but themselves they've scored 20 plus in all 4 games this season, including last week where it was played in very wet conditions at Suncorp when they played the Dolphins. They scored 20 points in that game, and that was with limited field position as well. I like the Broncos to score 26 to 30 plus points in this game, which if the Tigers themselves can find around the 18 points, this could go very close to going over that number. We've seen like a trend of unders last weekend. I think that can definitely turn around this weekend, with most of these games going to be played in better conditions than what we saw last week. Broncos have won and covered the past two versus Tigers, 34-10 down at Campbelltown last season, where the Broncos were $1.20 favorites. And then early in 2023, Broncos were 16.5 point favorites and won 46-12. So really high scoring game at Suncorp. 43.5 sailed over that number. Broncos scored more than that themselves. Prior to the past two meetings, the Tigers did win and cover all four meetings between 2019 and 2022, but have lost 6 of their past 8 at Suncorp. Broncos should get over the line here. Tigers, like without Luai guiding the side, they might go back to a few of their old patterns, but I wouldn't be taking the Broncos to win by 18 plus. On to Sunday, good game this. Manly Seagulls versus Melbourne Storm. Storm coming off a loss against the Dragons last week. Back-to-back road games for them. $1.58 favourites though, -5.5. The line has dropped down to 4.5, so a bit of money for Manly. 47.5 point total, which has stayed the same. 10 of the past 13 between these two sides have gone under, but Jerome Hughes may come back into the side for the Storm this week. He's currently listed on the extended bench. If he's out, I'll be leaning towards the Seagulls at the plus and the game to go under. If he's in the side, Storm could grind out a close win here against Manly. But overall, I think the Seagulls definitely can keep this game very close. They've won and covered 3 of the past 4 against Melbourne, including the past 3 at home. Last season, round 12, Manly won 26 points to 20 as 4.5 point underdogs. Back to 2023 at home, they won 18-8, and then in 2022 they won 36-30. So they've had this habit of being around this converted try underdog against Melbourne and winning these games outright. The plus handicap. Seagulls have also won 11 of their past 13 at Four Pines Park. All real positive sides for Manly to get over the line. These are the top 2 attacking sides overall this season. They're both averaging over 31 points. However, keep in mind, like Storm without Jerome Hughes last week in wet conditions against the Dragons only scored the 8 points and just the 1 try, so definitely weren't at their best. So that's why I think you just can't make a decision on the total until you know if Hughes is playing. I think if he is playing, we could see a bit of a higher scoring game. For this matchup, both sides are strong defensively. Considering these are the top 2 attacking sides, we're really not getting like a big total with it at 47.5. Want to keep in mind these are 2 of the best defensive sides as well this season. So that's why I also think it could be a bit of a close game with the Seagulls keeping it close enough to cover the spread. And then the final game of the round, Bulldogs against Newcastle. Bulldogs -5.5 out to -6.5. Knights off the bye, paying around $2.60, $2.70 currently. Total has moved down from the 46.5 down to 45.5. Bulldogs, only undefeated side left in the competition, 4-0 so far this season, coming off a big win as an underdog for the first time this season against the Sharks. They play the Knights and then they're off for the bye, so motivation for them will be high to get over the line in this game. 15 of the past 19 head-to-head have gone under the total points line. Both are very strong defensive sides. Bulldogs only conceding 14.5 points a game. The past 2 weeks, they've conceded a combined 14 points against the Eels and Sharks. And Newcastle ranked 15th in attack, only averaging 14 points a game. 6 points in their last game against Gold Coast, and 26 points against the Dolphins was their only time they've scored over 10 points this season. I think they're definitely going to struggle to score here against the Bulldogs. I like them to win this game if they bring the form from last week, and also like it to be low scoring. Bulldogs have won and covered the past 2 versus the Knights. Last time they met in round 13 last season, they won 32-2. And earlier on last season, they won 36-12 at home. The past 4 meetings have all been blowouts, all by 24 plus points. That probably favors the Bulldogs. They're the side more likely to run out as a blowout winner in this matchup. The only real negative for the Bulldogs is that they've lost their past 3 at a core stadium. But I think they get over the line here. I think we see a low-scoring game and more defensive mindset of game between these two sides, as that's going to play into both of their strengths. Bulldogs are the only side who could really win this game in more of a shootout. So that's my early look at the games coming up this weekend. If you want to see everything I'm betting, check out the NRL Best Bets membership. That's where you can also use the NRL Bet Finder tools, which is everything I use to research the games and break down the matchups to determine where team strengths and weaknesses are, so to make sure I'm finding the best possible betting opportunities on each game. Thanks guys for watching. Stay tuned for the try score video coming up later this week.